feel like the world's kind of lost the plot? Like success is punished and mediocrity gets a pat on the back. Well, buckle up because that's the world Ayn Rand drops us into with Atlas Shrugged. And we're tackling part one of this monster today. It's a trip through a future America that feels both strangely familiar and kind of terrifying.
It's like she bottled our anxieties about the future, you know?
Hmm.
Crumbling infrastructure, the government breathing down everyone's necks this weird resentment towards anyone who actually excels. And then she cranks it up to 11.
Yeah, and then there's this question that keeps popping up, this phrase that's both a puzzle and a punch to the gut. Who is John Galt? It's like she's challenging us right along with her characters to figure it out.
It becomes a symbol, right? This John Galt. He's like this missing piece of the puzzle, the answer everyone's searching for as everything seems to be falling apart.
Totally. And speaking of searching, let's talk about our main players. We've got Dagny Taggart, this powerhouse woman trying desperately to keep her family's railroad from going under while everyone else seems content to watch it crash and burn.
She embodies this almost superhuman level of dedication to competence, to getting things done no matter what roadblocks the world throws at her. And then there's Rearden, this industrial genius who creates Rearden metal, a material that has the potential to revolutionize, well, everything.
Talk about ambitious. But instead of applause, he's met with suspicion, resentment, almost like they hate him for being so good at what he does. It's like Rand is asking this really uncomfortable question. What happens when those who excel are punished just for being good?
It gets right to the heart of her philosophy, this tension between what an individual can achieve and the crushing weight of a society that wants everyone to be the same. And then there's Francisco d'Anconia, Dagny's childhood friend. He's gone from being a brilliant, successful industrialist to this seemingly careless playboy who's running his copper empire straight into the ground.
It's bizarre, right? Why would someone sabotage their own success? But there's something else going on there with Francisco, something more than meets the eye. He's playing a much deeper game, one that challenges the very foundation of this world that's falling apart.
You've got these three characters, and they all represent different ways of reacting to the collapse happening around them. You've got Dagny, this unstoppable force of production, fighting to maintain excellence. Then there's Rearden, driven by this internal compass of creation and value, but constantly butting heads with those who just want to take what he's made. And Francisco, he embodies something else entirely, a complete and utter rejection of a system he sees as broken beyond repair.
And boy, is the system broken. Rand paints a grim picture of this future America. We're talking cities falling apart, industries collapsing left and right, and a government that's more interested in controlling people than actually fixing anything.
She uses the slow death of Taggart Transcontinental to show this bigger societal collapse in miniature. This once great railroad, a symbol of American innovation and progress, is literally falling apart. Tracks are breaking, trains are going off the rails, and the government is just piling on regulations that seem designed to cripple it, not help it.
Yeah, it's like they're obsessed with controlling the outcome, but they don't have a clue about the process. And nowhere is that clearer than in their hostility toward anyone who actually creates something of value. You remember that line that made you stop and think, don't you see that's what you're being punished for because it was good?
Oof, yeah, it hits hard. It's like she's forcing us to examine our own beliefs about success and morality. In this world, being ambitious, striving for something better, it's seen as a threat.
Which leads us to this whole idea of the virtue of selfishness, right? Which isn't about greed or stomping on others, but recognizing the importance of your own life, your own talents, and refusing to apologize for them.
Exactly. Rand argues that true morality lies in chasing your own rational self-interest, in creating something valuable, not in sacrificing yourself to a system that wants to grind you down.
So in this world, on the edge, what do these characters have to hold on to?
Well, for Dagny and Rearden, it's this crazy ambitious project, the construction of the John Galt line. This revolutionary train line built with Rearden metal becomes this powerful symbol of their refusal to be beaten down by the system.
And that name, John Galt, attached to this amazing feat of engineering, it's like a spark of rebellion, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, there's a different way. Okay, hold on tight, because this is where things get really good. So Dagny is fighting off bureaucrats, trying to keep the railroad afloat, and she stumbles across something incredible, a motor just abandoned in this rundown factory.
But it's not just any motor. This thing is like a glimpse into the future, a potential answer to the energy crisis that's crippling the world.
And she becomes obsessed with finding whoever invented it, convinced that this unknown genius might be the key to saving not just her railroad, but maybe everything.
This search, it consumes Dagny. It leads her to this guy, Dr. Axton, a former philosopher who's chosen to live a quiet life as a short-order cook.
Seriously, this guy's like a cross between Socrates and a diner chef. He drops these cryptic clues, confirms that the motor is the real deal, that the inventor is this once-in-a-generation mind. But he won't tell her who it is.
He's making her work for it, pushing her to think differently, to look past the surface. He sees the potential in her, the capacity to understand John Galt, but he's not going to make it easy.
Talk about frustrating, right? It's like he's waving the answer right in front of her, but she has to prove she's ready.
And then, just as it feels like she's about to crack the code, she gets this frantic call. Ellis Wyatt, this independent oil tycoon who's been going toe-to-toe with the government, is about to do something drastic.
Talk about leaving you hanging, right? That phone call, the sense of dread, and bam, Rand doesn't mess around. Part 2 kicks off with a literal explosion. Ellis Wyatt, that defiant oil man, torches his own oil fields rather than let the government get their hands on them.
Talk about making a statement. It's a powerful image, isn't it? This guy choosing to destroy his life's work rather than watch it get swallowed up by a system that just wants to control everything. It really gets at this choice. A lot of Rand's characters face compromise who you are, to play by the rules of a broken game, or take a stand for your own freedom, even if it means walking away from everything.
It's brutal and honestly kind of inspiring at the same time. And it's just the beginning. As the government tightens its grip, things go from bad to worse for Taggart Transcontinental. We're talking regulations on top of regulations, each one like a nail in the coffin for innovation and achievement.
Like the anti-dog-eat-dog rule. Remember that one? Sounds good in theory, right? Who wants to live in a dog-eat-dog world?
But then you look closer and it becomes this tool to drag everyone down to the lowest common denominator. Don't you dare try to be better than anyone else. That's the message.
That makes you want to scream, right? And you see the effect it has on Dagny and Rearden. They're drowning in paperwork, dealing with shortages caused by the government's own incompetence and getting blamed for being good at what they do.
And yet they don't break. Dagny just pushes forward with the John Galt line, more determined than ever to prove that human ingenuity can't be stamped out. It's not just a railroad at this point. It's a symbol that someone out there still believes in doing things the right way. And Rearden, even when they force him to hand over the formula for his medal, you can tell they haven't really beaten him. There's that scene where he's watching those government guys squabble over how to use his creation, and he just starts laughing. Not a mean laugh or anything, but like he pities them. They can have his formula, but they can't have the thing that made him create it in the first place.
Exactly. It's that spark of creation that they can't touch. It gets to that core idea in Rand's philosophy. Real value comes from within, from the ability to think and create and strive for something great. That's not something the government can control, no matter how hard they try.
It's a powerful message, and you really see it play out in Dagny and Rearden's relationship, which, by the way, is crazy intense. But it's more than just a love story, isn't it? They recognize something in each other, a shared strength, a refusal to give up.
Totally. Remember what Dagny tells him when things are at their absolute bleakest? Don't quit the steel business. I won't promise you a job on the railroad.
Yeah.
It's like she sees him, the core of who he is, and she respects that even more than his success.
And they push each other to be better, to fight for something more. Like the construction of the John Galt line, it becomes this testament to human will, building that seemingly impossible bridge out of Rearden metal, pushing the boundaries of what everyone thought was possible.
Oh man, that scene where they test the bridge for the first time, I was on the edge of my seat. You could feel the tension, the weight of everyone's doubts.
Seriously. I thought my heart was going to beat out of my chest. And when that train makes it across, talk about a victory. It's this reminder that even in the darkest times, human ingenuity can still find a way.
A fleeting victory, though, unfortunately. Because while Dagny and Rearden are celebrating, the walls are closing in.
It's like the more they achieve, the bigger the target on their backs becomes. And that question, who is John Galt, takes on this whole new urgency. It's like they're clinging to this idea that somewhere, somehow, John Galt holds the answer to fixing everything.
It's interesting, though, right? The world is falling apart around them, but they're not giving up. If anything, it's like it fuels them, makes them even more determined.
What's that saying? What doesn't kill you?
Makes you stronger. Except in this case, what doesn't kill them just strengthens their resolve to challenge the very system that's trying to crush them.
You know, for all the darkness and chaos in this part of the book, there's also this thread of hope, right? Like with that abandoned motor Dagny found. It's this symbol that a different way is possible, that someone out there found a solution so radical it could change everything.
And that's what keeps you reading. Dagny's unwavering belief that if she can just find the person who created that motor, she can save everything she holds dear.
It's like a detective story. She's following the clues, chasing this ghost of a man, this idea. But it's more than just finding John Galt, isn't it? She's looking for something to hold on to, a philosophy that can combat the suffocating control that seems to be everywhere.
And that search leads her right back to Dr. Axton, that enigmatic short-order philosopher. He confirms that the motor is everything she believes it to be, that the inventor is the real deal, but he's not giving her any easy answers. You'll have to learn to see the motor, he tells her. It's like he's challenging her to go beyond her practical engineering mind and embrace a whole new way of thinking.
Talk about frustrating. But before she can really dig into that, that's when she gets the news about Ellis Wyatt. It's gone off the grid, vanished after torching his oil fields, and the government is freaking out.
And you can tell Dagny senses it. There's a connection. The motor, John Galt, Wyatt disappearing. That's all part of the same puzzle, but the picture is still blurry.
Yeah, and as part 2 ends, you're left with this feeling that everything's about to change. The world Dagny knows is hanging by a thread, and the big question isn't who is John Galt anymore. It's will she find him before it's too late? Part 3 of Atlas Shrugged. It's like stepping into this weird calm in the middle of a hurricane. The world outside is imploding, chaos everywhere. But here in this hidden valley, Galt's Gulch, there's this eerie peace.
It's a stark contrast.
Totally. Dagny stumbles into this secret society of brilliant minds who basically said screw it to the world and decided to build their own little utopia.
It's the ultimate act of self-reliance, right? This hidden valley surrounded by mountains becomes this symbol of rejecting a world that punishes you for being exceptional. These are the innovators, the artists, the thinkers who said, enough?
It's tempting to call it a utopia, you know? A place where individual achievement is valued, where talent is the only currency that matters, and the only rule is to think for yourself. But even in this paradise, Dagny can't completely escape the pull of the world she left behind. She's still trying to figure out John Galt, still wrestling with this internal tug of war, disappear into this perfect bubble, or go back and fight for the world on the brink.
And it's in Galt's Gulch that she finally meets him face to face. John Galt, the name that's haunted the entire story, is no longer a ghost, a whisper. He's real, flesh and blood, the embodiment of everything Rand believes in: reason, individual rights, the pursuit of your own happiness above all else.
And here's the thing, he's not some power-hungry dictator, which is what you might expect with all the hype, you know? He's more like a teacher, a mentor, guiding Dagny and the others to see the world through a new lens.
Their conversations, they're like a masterclass in objectivism. They dig into morality, the role of government, the nature of free will. It's intense, thought-provoking stuff that makes you question everything you thought you knew about how society should work.
No kidding. Rand doesn't make it easy on you. She throws these big, complex ideas at you and forces you to grapple with them. But while Dagny's off in Galt's Gulch, the world outside is spinning further and further out of control. The railroad's on the verge of collapse, the government's tightening its grip, and it's this constant reminder of what's at stake.
It makes you wonder, can they really stay isolated in their little utopia while everything burns around them? Can they really build something better while the world they left behind crumbles?
And that tension is what drives this whole last part of the book Dagny's caught, between this desire for Galt, for his vision of a world built on reason and individual achievement, and this responsibility she feels for the people she left behind, for a world on the brink.
It all leads up to that amazing scene where Galt finally reveals himself to the world during this radio broadcast. He lays it all out as manifesto, a rallying cry for anyone who values their own mind, who's ready to reject a system built on forcing people to sacrifice for those who don't.
Talk about a power move. It's this amazing speech, this call to action, but it's also a warning. Galt makes it crystal clear there's no saving a society that refuses to save itself.
It all comes back to the individual. That's what makes Atlas Shrugged such a powerful and enduring book. It's more than just a story. It's about what it means to be human, to grapple with these big questions of freedom, morality, and the role of government.
So we come to the end of the book, and the question that sticks with you isn't just who is John Galt, but rather, what would it take to create a world where the John Galts don't feel like they have to disappear? It's about recognizing and celebrating the achievers, the innovators, the ones who dare to be great, and asking ourselves, what kind of world are we building for them?
It's a question worth thinking about. It's a question Rand, through this complex and challenging story, forces us to confront. Because in the end, the choices we make, the values we embrace, they shape the world we live in. Atlas Shrugged is a reminder to think for ourselves, to take responsibility for our own lives, and never stop questioning the world around us.